Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about tips for a new graduate. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, I'm new to corporate and your advice is really helpful to me, especially at this stage. What advice would you give to a new grad who has just joined the industry? Well, my friend, so I'm gonna give you the tips that I've found to be most useful. We're not gonna talk all that much about specific tools or anything right now because I don't know sort of what your role. There's too much to go into, and I don't know enough about your background and what you're working with and so forth. But I will give you some general advice that I've always found to be useful. So to get the first one out of the way, do your best. And that might seem obvious to you, but the thing is that depending on how much effort you put into what you're doing, especially in the earlier stages, it potentially has a lot more impact on your overall career going forward, because you may not think so right now, depending on who you are and how you feel about the software industry in general. I suppose it may differ, of course, but in general, you're going to have higher levels of motivation to do really, really well now when you're fresh and when you start. That may or may not change over time. What I can basically promise you is that at some point you're going to see a decline on your interest levels for the profession and get a little bit complacent. It happens to everybody, myself included. And it's really good for you if you invest in your own personal growth and education early on in these stages, because as you grow older, you may think that it doesn't matter all that much, but right now you might be concerned that you don't have the necessary skills due to the fact that you are a junior software developer. And then with time, of course, you become a senior, and therefore you have job satisfaction, and you have, well, not satisfaction necessarily, but you have job security at the very least. That is potentially how it can go, but remember something. Just because you have more years of experience doesn't mean that the expectations go away, because they will still be there. It's just that they will change a little bit, and usually the way it changes is that as you grow more senior, the expectations on your experiences and how much you know about up-to-date practices and relevant tools and so on and so on, your mastery of the craft, if you will, those expectations will go up to a certain point. It's not always going to be the case. I'm not going to try to scare you or anything like that. I'm just urging you to leverage this time, because what's beautiful about, for all the things that are shitty about being a junior, one thing that is really nice about it is that right now, on average, people expect you to fuck up. They expect you to not know things and so forth and so forth. So leverage this time, because it becomes more and more unforgivable for you to not really know what you're doing the older you get and the more senior you get. When you're at my stage of the personal, at my career levels, it's basically expected that I should quote unquote know everything and so forth and so forth. Of course, that's not, nobody knows everything, but the expectations go up. So first and foremost, do your best and leverage the time you have now as a junior as well as you can. Second thing is, have a positive attitude towards everybody around you, because in the early stages especially, and this is a tip that I give even all the way up to mid-levels and so forth, before you go through what I call basic training, and what I refer to when I say basic training is just that you know the 9 to 5 grind of, in this case it's web development that I do, right? You know how to work and be autonomous. You don't need all that much support from other people and so forth. You mean having a positive and sunny attitude towards other people will always be to your benefit, of course, but it's extra important in the beginning when you very much depend on support from other people usually, because as a junior you're more often going to find yourself in need of other people like peers or seniors or so forth to help you out with things you may not understand or things you need to get an introduction to. When you get to be old and bitter like myself, I mean, I would never behave that way, but in essence I don't really need anybody apart from the people who give me access to the system, because I've reached a level of mastery of the craft where I can basically do everything I need to do without a lot of support. That is the sort of area where you want to be, I argue at the very least, before you get experimental with your career. When you start getting into, you know, more niche languages, or you want to do like completely like professional consultancy or start up your own companies or anything like that. When you get to a point where you've mastered the basics, you are mid-level, as I like to call it. If you're a mid-level software developer, you can take some risks and you can sort of behave a little bit like, and some do, guys, I'm not advocating you should do that in any way, but some people do actually get a little bit arrogant or like a little bit poor in the attitude and so forth when they get to a point where they feel like, yeah, I can get any job, or yeah, you know, it doesn't really matter, right? I'm not saying that you should be that sort of person, but try extra much to create good connections with the coworkers that you have when you are a junior software developer, especially in those situations, because they will be useful to you if they have experiences usually, and you will need some support. And that brings us to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Remember, you're a junior, you're a fresh graduate type of person. You're going to feel horrible many times. I promise you, you're going to feel anxiety over that you're not fast enough, not smart enough, etc., etc. But the best way to cure that is, of course, to get better at the craft. And sometimes in order to get better or to make headway on the projects that you have or the tasks that you're assigned, you will need to ask for help. My biggest tip to you here is that ask for help, but make sure that you have put personal effort into resolving the issue first. Because if you come to people every 5 minutes without ever trying yourself before you start asking the seniors to help you out, they will start getting a little bit, to potentially get a little bit annoyed with you, because they feel like you're not respecting their time and you're coming and asking for help every 5 minutes without ever trying yourself. And that's something you should learn very quickly, guys. For a lot of the people within software development, myself included, it is at some point more or less expected of you to be fairly autonomous, to be able to Google for answers to your own problems or figure them out or so forth and so forth. It doesn't do to go and ask for help every 5 minutes. You can always ask for help. Of course, if you need it, you need it, but be a little bit mindful about making a personal effort first, because it will be appreciated. And if you don't do it, it potentially ends up breaking rule number 2, right? To have a positive and good attitude towards your coworkers, because I promise you, it gets old really, really quickly for the more experienced software developers to like have to hold hand on someone every 5 minutes and feel like, yeah, they haven't even tested the first thing about this, they haven't even read the documentation, they haven't done any of that. Try to avoid that as much as possible. Ask for help, but make sure you do it after you have tried your best to fix it yourself. And then lastly, I'm going to say to you to try to find a coping mechanism. This sort of stuff that I was telling you about earlier, having negative emotions, feeling anxieties, and being scared shitless, thinking about things like releasing to production or estimating time, how much time you need, stuff like that. These sorts of anxieties, they're very natural and they happen to absolutely everybody. It happened to me, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen to you as well. And the thing that I mean when I say getting a coping mechanism is to understand that this is part of the journey. No one ever started something fresh and were just immediately the best at it and never had to evolve. There's always going to be some rough patches, there's always going to be some stuff that's going to scare you, and you need to find a way to push through that. Everybody's way is slightly different, and it may vary from time to time, but try to think about it a little bit, because when you have those times when you feel like you want to give up, or I like to actually jokingly say that the best sign that you're going to make a really great software developer is if you can sit for 3 days non-stop try to figure out why something isn't working in the code, and feel like shit, doubt yourself, and be super annoyed at that you can't solve this problem and it's all hopeless. And then something happens, you find that right answer on Stack Overflow or some tip or on some forum somewhere, and then you solve the problem, and then immediately after you solve the problem, it's like it never was a problem. Like all that anxiety and depression and call it whatever, like all of that, just it's like, yeah, I'm fine now, everything's good again. Because if you can let all that baggage go after you fix the issue, then you don't build up resentment over time. That's a very good sign. But having some coping mechanism, something that takes your mind off it for a moment and makes you kind of go, okay, now I feel good again, let's go back and see if I can fix it now instead, and then just keep on trying. That's something that is very well, it's a very good investment for you. And then make sure as well that you understand that this process is the same for everybody. The difference between, say, you and me, if you're starting out, is that I've just done exactly this thing for more years, which means that I'm better. You will probably be better at it and be quicker. And that's why you shouldn't compare yourself to, when you're fresh. It is easy to say, it's hard to do. I do it, of course, as well, and I have done it for years. You compare yourself to other people, and when you do, try to remember the thing I was saying, right? The difference between you and them is that they have done exactly this thing I'm telling you for years, and that's why they're ahead of you right now. You will catch up to them, I promise you, but right now you are still fresh, so cut yourself some slack. So what I want you to take away from this is that if I'm just giving general advice for someone who's a fresh graduate going into the industry, first and foremost, try to use your first 5 years, like the initial years of your career, as best as possible when you have that fire and passion and interest in what you're doing, because I promise you guys, sooner or later other things are going to matter more than coding, to some extent at the very least. And if you do want to stabilize your career long term, it's good for you to make sure that you at least have a mid-level understanding of the work that we do, so that you're applicable for most jobs in the future. Second thing is, have a positive attitude, make good social connections with the people at work, because especially in the beginning you're going to need them to some extent usually, and if you're lucky you have really nice coworkers who will give you help and give you support and answer questions and stuff like that. Which brings us to the third thing: make sure that when you get stuck, ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Do it. But remember that people are basically doing you a little favor. They're trying to be supportive of you, so respect their time. Make sure that you've really tried yourself first to figure the thing out, and then explain what you've done and tell them, I tried this, I tried that, and I just can't figure it out. Could you please help me? Most people will respond really well to that. If you just come and ask without ever trying yourself first, that can become a problem. So try to avoid that and really show people that you did try and you're stuck. That's usually enough. And then make sure that you find a coping mechanism for when you feel like you're the slowest person in the room, like your story is behind schedule and everybody else is so good and so forth and so forth. There are going to be times like that, and there are going to be times when you can't figure out the bug, where you have issues and so forth, and you're going to feel like shit, and you're going to feel like the dumbest motherfuckers ever lived. I promise you're going to at some point. It happens to everybody, and the thing that you need to understand is it's the same for everybody, and you just have to push through. So find those things that gives you enough personal strength so that you can feel shit for a little while, and then go back and sit and try to figure it out again. And repeat that process until you're old and bald like me, and now I have exactly the same problems. It's just that it's usually quicker for me to solve it than it used to be. Have a great day.